One of the coolest experiences that a coaster enthusiast can have while visiting a park is getting a Zen ride on a coaster. A Zen ride is when you are the only person on the train when you ride a coaster. And whenever I visit a park, I always try to see if I can get a Zen ride on at least one of their major coasters. I've gotten Zen rides on 31 different coasters as of now, and in this video, I'll be ranking the top 20 best coasters that I've gotten Zen rides on. This list will mainly be focusing on the ride itself, but if I feel like the Zen ride really enhances the experience, I'll mention it. Kicking off the top 20 is Cyclone at Indiana Beach. This is my most recent new coaster credit as of when I'm recording this, and it was a surprisingly solid ride. The helixes were decently forceful, and the drops were a lot more sudden than I expected. I got one ride on Cyclone since it was down a lot of the day I was at Indiana Beach last year, but it was a good one. I do wish I got to ride it again, and once I go back to ride American Dry Looping, I'll get back on it. That being said, it's not as strong as the other coasters higher on this list, and that's why Cyclone is only at number 20. Sticking at the same park for number 19, we have Tig'rr, I don't know how you pronounce it. This coaster is very similar to Cyclone, but I give Tig'rr coaster the edge for it being more intense. Tig'rr has several low-to-the-ground turns that feel way more intense than they look, especially the first one. This is by far the easiest coaster at Indiana Beach to get a Zen ride on since it doesn't normally get huge lines from my experience, and they only load one group per car. Much like Cyclone, I don't have Tig'rr coaster ranked as high because the other coasters ahead of it pack more of a punch, but it's still a fun ride. The only defunct coaster on this list takes a number 18 spot, and that is Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. One of two coasters at Cedar Point to make this list, Wicked Twister was a ride that was often overlooked. Nobody really ranked this ride super high to my knowledge, but I thought it was very enjoyable. The launches kept getting stronger and more intense as the ride went on, and the twisting spikes were really disorienting. It was raining when I got my Zen ride on this back in July of 2021, and since I was up front, this made the experience more memorable. I wish the Wicked Twister was able to find a new home instead of being scrapped, but that isn't the case. I do miss Wicked Twister, but I can't rank it higher than number 18 on this list. Number 17 has got to be the most obscure coaster on this list. I'm talking about Wildcat at Frontier City. I bet you completely forgot this coaster even existed, and I don't blame you. I don't hear about too many enthusiasts making it out to Frontier City. I made it out to Frontier City right when it reopened during the pandemic back in 2020. As you can expect, the park was absolutely dead. This made it very easy for me to get multiple different Zen rides. Wildcat is my favorite ride in the park, and I say that because Diamondback was unfortunately closed, and that's widely considered to be the best ride in the park. Since I haven't ridden it, I can't say for how it actually rides, and this makes Wildcat the best ride there from my experience. It's an Alpenback wooden coaster that runs through the trees, very reminiscent of Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis, but Wildcat pales in comparison to that. I still thought it had some decent airtime moments and a great wooded setting, and it wasn't too rough either. The day after Frontier City reopened, I actually got stuck on Wildcat's final brake run for about 15 minutes, and it was extremely hot outside. So hot, in fact, that a ride operator actually brought me a glass of water while sitting on the final brakes. That is a coaster experience I never thought I'd have. Overall, Wildcat was a good ride, and I look forward to riding it next time we go to Frontier City, but in terms of coasters I've gotten Zen rides on, it's not exactly one of my favorites. That's why I have it ranked at number 17. From my number 16 coaster, let's go back to Indiana Beach one more time, this time for Steel Hawg. This is my personal favorite ride of the park. I know most people will say Cornball Express is the best ride in the park, and while I have both ranked fairly close in my list, I love just how wacky Steel Hawg is. This coaster's layout is quite odd, but it packs a punch. The first drop is powerful, the dive loop gave some great hang time, and the downwards inline twist is probably my favorite part of the ride. You also have some sections of track that bank outwards, and these just add to it. Given the bizarre nature of this coaster, it's impossible to not have fun on Steel Hawg. I got my Zen ride on this in 2022, and while I did enjoy my rides on it last year, I think I wasn't quite as impressed as I was on my rides in 2020. That's why I have it ranked at number 16 and not higher. Starting the top 15 is Batman the Ride at Six Flags St. Louis. This is one of two B&M inverts on this list, and it's a powerhouse. Batman clones are known for being really intense rides, and this one is no different. The elements on this ride are wild. The vertical loops and the helix pull some very strong positive Gs. The zero-G roll provides great whip, and the corkscrews provide a great mix of both. The first drop is also a gut punch if you're sitting in the back row. Most of my Zen rides on Batman came when I was a ride operator in the spring of 2021, as I often did safety rides on it prior to park opening. If you're looking for a relentless invert, it doesn't get much more relentless than Batman, and I think it's worthy of a top 15 spot. We don't have to go very far to find my number 14 coaster, as it's only a few minute walk away from Batman. This is American Thunder. This GCI is often seen as one of the weaker ones, and while I do find it to be a bit of an afterthought at my home park these days, it's still a good ride. From my experience, American Thunder is very inconsistent with how it runs. First drop and the double down are very consistent, regardless of how fast it's running. It's the rest of the layout that can ride differently from one day to the next. Some days, the airtime is really powerful and the laterals are strong. Other days, there isn't much airtime, if at all, and the laterals are a lot weaker. The inconsistency of this coaster is why I have it ranked at number 14, and I've done two Zen rides on this, with one coming in 2020 and the other last year. Number 13 is Alpengeist at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. This monster B&M invert seems to draw mixed reactions among enthusiasts. Some would call it the best invert in the country, and others say it's too rough to enjoy. I'm somewhere in the middle of this debate. My first ride on Alpengeist was extremely rough, and the other rides I got were excellent. I personally have it ranked towards the middle of my B&M invert list, but I can't deny, this coaster has an awesome layout. The vertical loop feels like one of the vertical loops found on the Batman clones, but on a larger scale. The Cobra roll was solid, but it's not my favorite one I've experienced. The Immelman and first drop were also solid. Unfortunately, the mid-course was trimming hard when I went, and this hindered the second half. The zero-G roll is probably my least favorite zero-G roll on a B&M invert, and the corkscrew lacked the same whip that a lot of other B&M loopers have. All in all, Alpengeist is a really good invert and a really good ride in general, but the lackluster second half prevents it from being higher than number 13. As for the Zen ride I got on Alpengeist, it was a front row night ride, and I thought it would be the last ride of the night. That was not the case. Another coaster that seemed to get a lot of hate lands at number 12 on this list, and that is Superman Escape from Krypton at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is the only instrument reverse freefall left in operation, and is a very simple coaster. Simple, but effective. It launches riders from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 7 seconds. It's definitely not the best launch I've experienced, but this was my first time going 100 miles an hour on a coaster. I don't remember there being any airtime while climbing up or down the tower, but I think the restraints have something to do with that. Superman is the first coaster on this list where I feel like a Zen ride really improves your experience. The reason why is because the cars tend to go higher on the tower earlier in the day when there are fewer people on the ride. I knew about this before I visited Six Flags Magic Mountain in June of 2018, so I knew for the best experience I had to go right to Superman when the park opened for the day. My Zen ride on Superman was the first train of the day, and since I was the only one on the train, I felt good about the coaster going really high on the tower. Sure enough, Superman went way into the red section on my first ride. I hear that doesn't happen too often, so having that as my first ever ride was awesome. Overall, I think Superman Escape from Krypton is an extremely underrated coaster that has its place in the park, and I feel like number 12 is a good spot for it. Just missing the top 10 is Raven at Holiday World. This wind coaster is known for being a crazy ride, and rightfully so. Raven provides one of the wildest wind coaster experiences out there. Thanks to a combination of some really solid airtime in the first half, strong laterals in the second half, fantastic pacing from start to finish, and a great wooded setting, it's easy to understand why a lot of people love this coaster. Much like Alpengeist, the Zen ride I got on the Raven was a front row night ride, and the night ride was a really cool experience. Each of the elements caught me off guard, even though I was ready for them. The one reason why I can't rank Raven in my top 10 is because of how rough it was on my most recent ride. My most recent ride on the Raven was in the very back row, and it was brutal, especially in the second half. I had a really bad headache by the time the ride hit the final brakes. It was not pleasant. It doesn't help that I rode Legend in the very back row a few minutes prior, and that ride was also brutal. Maybe that made Raven feel rougher than it actually was. I wish that Holiday World would retract the second half because the track work they did over the turn on Lake Rudolph in 2021 helped it run better than ever. Maybe some track work could help elevate Raven into my top 10, but for now, I have it at number 11. Cracking the top 10 is Prowler at Worlds of Fun. This is by far the best GCI I've ridden, and is what I wish Mystic Timbers was. While Mystic did not give the airtime I expected, Prowler was launching me out of my seat on every single hill. The best ride I got on Prowler was during Haunt. I accidentally got what had to have been a one-click ride in the front row. I didn't realize how much room I had until I was on the lift hill. After I found out, I decided to hold the lap bar to see how good the airtime could be, and I was blown away. The whole time I was flying way out of my seat, and it was shocking how strong the airtime was. Combine that with the ridiculous laterals that Prowler had, and it was one of the best coaster rides I got in 2022. That ridiculous ride wasn't even at night, but rather in the early afternoon. Speaking of it, the night ride on Prowler was great, but there are better night rides that I've experienced. I also rode Prowler at the end of July last year, and that was when I got the Zen ride. It didn't open until around 12:15 because the track needed to be greased, but I stayed in the ride plaza for over an hour because I was determined to get a Zen ride on it, which I did. I even heard one of the ride ops call me a trooper because I stuck around for so long. Zen ride or not, Prowler deserves a top 10 spot on this list. Here's one you didn't see coming. Number 9 is the Beast at Kings Island. I bet you didn't expect to see this one on the list, and I too am surprised that I managed to get a Zen ride on it. My Zen ride on the Beast came during my high school graduation trip in July of 2021, and it was right when the park opened. Granted, the park was extremely dead the day I got the Zen ride on it, so that's how I managed to pull it off. I was the only one at the entrance when it opened, and beforehand I asked a worker about how many people are usually waiting for Beast to open. They said it was normally at least 50 people. As for how the coaster is, I think it's great. The Beast may not be as extreme as several others on this list, but the layout in the woods is a ton of fun to experience, and the helix at the end is absolutely insane. Although in 2022, I thought it wasn't as intense as my 2020 or 2021 rides. There are some other turns in the first half that pull some good laterals as well. I believe the Beast has one of the best Zen ride experiences you can have on a coaster, and I think it's number 2 for my favorite Zen ride experience. Since I was the only one on the train, I remained silent during the ride and listened to the coaster running along the track out in the woods. As weird as this may sound, it was honestly quite relaxing. Outside the Zen ride, the forces on the Beast aren't that strong, and that's why I have it at number 9. The 8 remaining coasters on this list are all in my top 25, and interestingly enough, the next 3 on this particular list are are numbers 15 through 13 in my overall list. If you haven't seen my top 25 coasters video yet, be sure to check that one out after this one. The link is down below. Let's head back to Holiday World for our number 8 coaster, Thunderbird. This is by far the best B&M wing coaster I've ridden for obvious reasons. First off, it's got an outstanding launch, which actually was my first one. Thunderbird is also a forceful wing coaster, which is something I don't hear too often. Last time I rode it, Thunderbird was so intense that it almost didn't seem possible. It was taking each of the elements at faster speeds than what I'm used to, and I was amazed. No joke, based off of the coasters I rode in 2022, Thunderbird I thought was more intense than all B&M inverts I rode, with the exception of maybe Batman. I even thought it was more intense than Montu or Afterburn. The element in vertical loop caused me to gray out. The Zero G roll is always a fun inversion, and the inline twist of the barn has phenomenal hang time and doubles as a great near miss element. Outside the coasters at my home park, Thunderbird is the coaster I've gotten the most Zen rides on. I've been riding it every year since it first opened in 2015. I also got stuck on Thunderbird's final brakes for about 10-15 minutes during Hollywood Nights last year. This ride also happened to be my most recent Zen ride on it. I said this in the top 25 coasters video I made, and I'll say it again here. If I'm including Thunderbird on a ranking video, chances are it'll always be ranked high for me no matter how many coasters I ride. This is why I have Thunderbird taking the number 8 spot. Number 7 is Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. This is far and away the coaster I've gotten the most Zen rides on, and is also the coaster that got me into being an enthusiast. Most of my rides on Screamin' Eagle come right when the park first opens in the morning, and this often results in me getting a Zen ride a lot of the time. I even got the first public train of 2016 as a Zen ride. Screamin' Eagle is tucked away in the woods in the back of Six Flags St. Louis, and it has multiple solid airtime moments throughout the route layout. It's also got a great sense of speed that's amplified by an awesome night ride. It's not the smoothest wind coaster I've ridden, but for a coaster that opened back in 1976, it's remarkably smooth despite its age. I always have a blast on Screamin' Eagle, and it's very close to taking the number 6 spot, but I can't quite put it up there for right now. For our number 6 coaster, let's head down the hill to Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast. This is by far the best premier rides coaster I've done. It has an awesome backwards launch, an intense inverted top hat, a killer overbank, and a massive vertical spike. Due to the popularity of Mr. Freeze, this is one of the hardest coasters at Six Flags St. Louis to get a Zen ride on. Most of the Zen rides I've gotten on it were right when it opened later in the day, or right at the end of the night because the line is shorter. This and Screamin' Eagle are very interchangeable for me, as I went back and forth on this during the 2022 season. As of now, I give Mr. Freeze a very slight edge for the ridiculous rides it gave during last year's Fright Fest. It was great the rest of the season as well, but the rides I got during Fright Fest put Mr. Freeze at number 6. Now we're getting into the coasters that getting a Zen ride on is pretty much unheard of. The coasters in this top 5 are on par with the Beast in terms of how hard it is to get a Zen ride on. Kicking off the top 5 is, ready for this? Maverick. Yes, I did manage to pull off a Zen ride on this one. While my Zen ride on Wicked Twister came during my second trip to Cedar Point in 2021, the Zen ride I got on Maverick came during my first trip to Cedar Point in 2016. I think that this makes this feat even more astonishing than it already is because Maverick was easily the most popular ride at Cedar Point back in 2016, and I say that because Steel Vengeance was not a thing yet. Maverick gets assigned on the list because it has everything a good layout needs. Whether you're talking about the beyond vertical drop, the camelbacks, or the ridiculous launch inside the tunnel, each element delivers on this coaster. Maverick gets brought up on a lot of other enthusiasts' lists of their favorite coasters they've ridden, but hardly anyone mentions getting a Zen ride on it. Despite that, Maverick is still one of the best coasters that I have ever ridden, and it takes the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4 is the Boss at Six Flags St. Louis. The final coaster at Six Flags St. Louis to make this list is also the hardest one in the park to get a Zen ride on. The park usually will not dispatch this coaster until there's a certain amount of people in the train. However, that isn't always the case, so I have managed to get a decent amount of Zen rides on this coaster. A majority of the Zen rides I've gotten on the Boss came during the Ace event called Daredevil Days in September of 2019 and in 2021. The Boss is often part of the exclusive ride time after the park closes for the night, and normally the park does not wait for a certain number of people during ERT. As for the ride itself, the Boss is fast, intense, and has really good airtime. It's also by far the roughest wooden coaster at Six Flags St. Louis, but normally that doesn't bother me too much. An added benefit of getting a Zen ride on the Boss is because the mid-course is less likely to slow the train down due to there being less weight in the train. Whenever this happens, the second half is way faster and more intense, with better forces all around. A lot of people want the Boss to get the RMC treatment, and I personally would not be happy if that happened. The Boss in its current form is in my top 10 overall, and it's good enough to take the number 4 spot on this list, but it cannot quite break into the top 3. Barely taking the number 3 spot from the Boss is Orion at Kings Island. The most recent Giga coaster to open the US is exceptional. Orion combines a great sense of speed with some awesome positive G's on the helix and the negative G's on the first drop, the speed hill, and the twisted hill before the final brake run. My Zen ride on Orion came during my most recent trip to Kings Island this past August, and it opened almost an hour after the park due to weather in the area. After starting off my day with Flight of Fear, I waited for Orion to open at the ride's entrance, and I quickly walked to the station once it did. There were other people behind me too, but the workers just so happened to close the loading gates right before they got into the station. This meant I got the Zen ride on Orion. The most memorable part about it is while I was on the lift hill, I remember seeing some darker clouds over by Diamondback and Mystic Timbers, and being the only one on the train made that a little bit freaky. Orion is my type of ride, and it cracks the top 3 on this list. In my top 25 coasters video I released a couple months ago, I mentioned that one park has 2 coasters in my overall top 5. The final 2 two coasters in this video are from that same park. If you saw that video, then you know which park I'm referring to, but if not, I'm talking about Islands of Adventure. The first of two coasters from that park is the Incredible Hulk coaster. This coaster packs one of the wildest ride experiences out there, as the intensity is incredibly high and non-stop. Each of the inversions and the underrated launch out of the tunnel left me speechless each time. While everything after the mid-course is slower, the first half has some of the best pacing of any coaster. And of course, I can't forget about the on-ride soundtrack, which I've raved about time and time again. I got 39 rides over the course of the 5 days I was at Universal, and 2 of them were Zen rides. I managed to accomplish this by rope dropping Hulk after doing Velocicoaster once or twice during early entry. On most of my rides, there were other people on the train, and this made the on-ride soundtrack seem quieter than it would be otherwise. The second Zen ride I got on Hulk was by far the best Zen ride I've ever had on any coaster. I remained silent the whole ride and just listened to the on-ride soundtrack, which seemed way louder on this particular ride than any of the other 38 rides I got. I think that has to do with the fact that there was no external noise to dampen it, but whatever that factor was that made the soundtrack seem louder, it made for a ride experience I'll never forget. I've ridden 235 different coasters as of now, and if I had to decide which single coaster ride was the absolute best, my answer is the second Zen ride on Hulk. I honestly do not see that ride being dethroned anytime soon, if at all, as it felt like heaven on earth for me. The Incredible Hulk coaster takes the number 2 spot with ease, but a certain coaster across the lake prevents it from taking the number 1 spot. Speaking of the coaster across the lake, I think you know which coaster it is. The number 1 coaster that I have gotten a Zen ride on is Velocicoaster. I bet having Hulk and Velocicoaster back to back on this list was not on your bingo card. If you're wondering how I pulled this one off, the process for doing so is a lot more simple than you might expect. All I did was get up early so I was first in line to get let into Islands of Adventure. Once the gates opened, I booked it straight to Velocicoaster right when early entry started. Everyone else towards the front of the pack goes straight to Hagrid first, and this made it easier for me to get a Zen ride on Velocicoaster. Wait, did I say a Zen ride? Because I meant to say 2. I know that you're probably stunned that I got 2, let alone 1 Zen ride, and I too am surprised I got the second one. On my last day, Velocicoaster did not open right at the start of early entry, but it did open about 5 minutes after I got there. There wasn't anyone directly behind me when it did open, but right when I got into the station, some other guests did show up. They decided to wait for the front row since it was their first time on it, and I was also in the front row. Because they voluntarily waited an extra train because I did not ask them to, I got the second Zen ride because no one else showed up after them either. Anyway, Velocicoaster needs little to no explanation for why it's number 1 on this list. Velocicoaster is one of, if not the most complete coaster of all time. It has world-class theming both in the queue line and during the ride itself, 2 outstanding launches, multiple great airtime moments, and 4 incredible inversions, including the demented Mosasaurus roll. Add some of the most comfortable restraints out there, and you have one of the greatest rides ever built. While I do prefer the Voyage to Velocicoaster in my overall list, I haven't gotten a Zen ride on the Voyage, and therefore I cannot include it on this list, allowing Velocicoaster to claim the number 1 spot for coasters I have gotten a Zen ride on. That concludes the list of the top 20 coasters that I have gotten a Zen ride on. I want to know what coasters you have gotten a Zen ride on. I'm pretty sure that someone watching this has gotten a Zen ride on a coaster that I haven't mentioned in this video, and knowing my luck, I'll probably end up getting at least 1 new Zen ride this year, and maybe it could be a coaster you've gotten a Zen ride on. Be sure to post a comment down below about what coasters you've gotten a Zen ride on, along with stating what else you liked about this video. On top of that, be sure to leave a like and share this video with someone else before moving on to the next video. If you're new to the channel and like what you saw, consider subscribing before moving on. My goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the summer, so be sure to subscribe and turn the bell on so you get notified every time I upload a new video. I also have an Instagram account for the pictures I take while visiting a park, so be sure to check me out there as well by using the link in the description of this video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later.